Well, hello everyone. So we're going to begin looking at something that's associated with and kind of close to our digestive system, and that being nutrition and metabolism. So essentially, what we're going to be looking at is kind of what's happening to the things that we ingest. What's happening to those things after we bring them into the body, right? And then also just what are some of those things, right? What are we ingesting? What are our various nutrients that we're consuming? What are the different types? What do they do? How do we use them? What happens if we have too many? So that's what we're going to look at through the next several sets of videos, and then we're also going to kind of toward the end of this lecture series is look at specifically what's happening to carbs. So what's happening to carbohydrates? So think sugar in a process called carbohydrate metabolism. So we're going to look at cellular respiration and how do we break down sugar to ultimately make energy for our cells, right? So if we're talking about nutrition and metabolism, we need to define some terms here, right? So the first term is nutrient, okay? So a nutrient is something that we consume, we bring into the body, and we use it for some specific purpose. So we use it to repair tissues, we use it to grow tissues, maintain tissues, something along those lines, right? So we're going to talk about our macronutrients, kind of our main nutrients, and these you're already familiar with. These are things like carbs and lipids and proteins. You also have micronutrients, simply meaning we need less of them compared to the macronutrients. And so macronutrients in terms of what we need in a given day is on the order of grams for every, usually based on your diet, so how many calories you need to consume per day. And then micronutrients are on a much smaller scale, so micrograms to milligrams of what we need per day, right? These are also, they can be considered organic or inorganic, meaning are they carbon-based or are they not carbon-based, and then essential or non-essential, meaning can we get them from within our body, so can our body make it, or do we need to get it from an outside source like our diet, right? Do we need to get it in our food, right? So macronutrients, again, carbs, lipids, proteins, water as well, and then the micronutrients are all of your vitamins and minerals, right? And so for some of these, we're going to use them directly to make ATP, so these are the carbs, lipids, and proteins. Others we're going to use for other chemical reactions, growth, use them for some structural integrity. So in this case, think of things like calcium, think of things like sodium, potassium. All these are various types of micronutrients that we'll look at, okay? So we said that a nutrient is it's some product that we consume. We use it for growth, maintenance, repair. Now, the energy that those nutrients provide, we're going to measure in the unit of calorie, right? Calorie. So there's kind of two calories, okay, to think of. There's the little c calorie and there's the big C calorie, okay? The little c calorie is, as you can see on the screen, the energy required to raise the temperature of 1 milliliter of water 1 degree Celsius. Okay, 1 degree Celsius. Now, this is a very small unit, okay? So when you think of calorie, when you look at the back of a bag of chips or you look at a soda can or something and you see how many calories are in it, that's big C calories, okay, which are called kilocalories, okay? Big C calories are 1,000 small c calories, okay? So these lowercase c calories, this the calorie, the energy used to change the temperature of 1 milliliter of water 1 degree Celsius, 1,000 of those equals 1 big C calorie, 1 kilocalorie. And what you see on food products like this Spam is calories 180 per serving. That's 180 kilocalories, big C calories. And so 1,000 of the small ones equals this big one. So instead of changing, it's the amount of energy, instead of changing 1 milliliter of water 1 degree Celsius, it's changing 1,000 milliliters, so 1 liter, right? So different types of nutrients provide different numbers of calories or kilocalories, right? So carbs provide 4 calories per gram, proteins provide 4 calories per gram as well, and lipids provide right? So you would say the lipids are more calorie dense, right? So for the same amount in terms of weight, in terms of the same amount of a particular nutrient, lipids are providing the greatest number of calories. Okay. So keep this in mind. We'll come back to this in a little bit when we talk about calorie balance and if we have too many calories versus not enough calories. But we'll talk about this in the context of weight, right? So weight gain, weight loss, things like that, right? So some of our other nutrients, so think maybe like micronutrients, think your vitamins and minerals, right? So an example here is vitamin D, right? Vitamin D, you may recall when talking about skeletal system, vitamin D is necessary for the absorption of calcium in the GI tract. So if you have insufficient vitamin D, you'll likely have insufficient calcium absorption. And consequently, if you don't have sufficient calcium, you don't have that kind of inorganic part of bone that contributes to bone's hardness, right? And so the bones become somewhat soft and more pliable and flexible. And so you end up with what you see on the screen. This is called rickets, right? Rickets. And so rickets is caused by a deficiency in vitamin D, which subsequently causes a deficiency in calcium, which causes the bones to be a little bit more soft, right? They're going to be more flexible, and so you can see this child, infant child picture down here, in which the weight of the body has caused the legs to bow. This is called a varus deformity of the legs, in which the proximal part of the tibia is more lateral than this distal part way down here that's a little bit more medial, right? So vitamin D is a good example. You could talk about lots of other vitamins. Vitamin A is necessary for the production of a protein in our eye that allows us to see, called rhodopsin. Vitamin C is necessary for collagen synthesis, and deficiency of vitamin C causes something called scurvy, right? And so if you have deficiencies in these various nutrients, then the functions of those nutrients, you're going to see some type of deficit, right? So good example here with vitamin D, right? You can also talk about vitamin B12. So we've got fat-soluble vitamins and water-soluble vitamins. The fat-soluble are vitamins K, A, D, and E, and then the B vitamins primarily and C vitamins are water-soluble. Right. So B12 is a good example. B12, we need this to produce red blood cells. A big thing with B12, if you think of a deficiency, is something called pernicious anemia, right? Pernicious anemia. Pernicious anemia is caused by a lack or insufficiency of something called intrinsic factor. An intrinsic factor is this glycoprotein produced in the stomach by our parietal cells. If you recall, the parietal cells are the same cells that produce hydrochloric acid. And this glycoprotein intrinsic factor, as it's called, is necessary for binding and aiding in the absorption of vitamin B12. Why do we need vitamin B12? We need it for making red blood cells. Okay, so if you don't have the intrinsic factor, and thus you don't have the vitamin B12, you end up with something called pernicious anemia. And so you're anemic, not because you don't have enough iron, or because you're bleeding, or because you have sickle cell, or anything like that, but it's because you don't have that glycoprotein intrinsic factor that's necessary to absorb the vitamin B12, right? Other nutrients, think water, right? So think of our blood pressure discussions, right? And the role of water in maintaining blood volume and blood pressure. Our other various nutrients, so proteins, carbs, and lipids, we'll have separate kind of discussions on each of these. For an example, think of proteins. They're part of our plasma membrane. They have structural integrity to our cells. They're involved in chemical reactions as enzymes, right? If they're an enzyme, they usually end in ACE, ASE. When we get to carbohydrate metabolism later on in several lectures, so cellular respiration, we'll talk about a bunch of different types of enzymes, but just remember those enzymes are examples of proteins. Okay, so we'll stop here with this kind of first part, so kind of an intro to our nutrition and metabolism. And what we're going to start with next is we're going to begin looking at our first type of kind of macronutrient. We're going to be looking at carbohydrates.